our ICE officers have incredible threats against them right now. And a lot of it is because people that are struggling with mental issues, or if they're struggling with being radicalized or a different philosophy, they're getting cover from the rhetoric that politicians and leaders across the country have given them by speaking that way. It almost excuses some of the actions that have taken. So I think that these ICE officers have just done incredible work by continuing to go out there and do that. But attacks against them have gone up 1,000% in just since this administration has started. Yeah. Now, what I love also is that as the left and Democrats have tried to turn their work into something ugly and have tried to attack them and their families and dox them and put them in dangerous situations, is that the American people have seen right through it. And they want to be a part of supporting our ICE officers and our law enforcement officers. In fact, just for the 10,000 new positions that we have over 150,000 people that applied for those 10,000 positions. So it's clear that everybody recognizes, how important our law enforcement are, and they want to be a part of the mission too.
But have you actually looked into, or is this part of your policy to be concerned about this vegan transgender cult that's murdered one of your officers just a few months ago?
I have under my department many different agencies. So I have, FEMA, TSA, Secret Service, the Coast Guard. I also have INA, which is an intelligence agency that cooperates with ODNI and the FBI and all of that. So that coordination is always happening. And that's what I think is important about what President Trump has done. In the past, these intelligence agencies were a little siloed and didn't share information and data and looking into people and groups that are conducting some type of suspicious activity and doing that investigative work. Now that the president has established this whole of government approach, that kind of cooperation on investigations is critically important and much more efficient than it used to be.
And the Secret Service, there's been a huge amount of criticism, quite justly, because of the lapses that led to Butler and the too close assassination attempts on the president. Are you confident that that's being fixed and that he is protected enough, particularly in this heightened risk environment?
The Secret Service are men and women who step up to not just do financial investigations, but personal protective detail. And they take that very seriously. And Sean Curran's doing a great job running the Secret Service, and he has implemented a lot of changes since he's been in place. He's implemented more training. We're building out new facilities to train them for the environments they're in today. If you look at what protecting this president while he's living a 24-hour day is very different than protecting the last one.
Yes.
It was a very different situation to protect Joe Biden than it is to protect President Trump at all these large rallies and the events that he does and as mobile as he is in the long days he puts in. So the changes that they're making are incredibly important to make sure they're prepared for all of that situation. And the transparency, people need the transparency out of Secret Service to know, and the president needs it the most, though. It's, he needs to trust them, and he does.
Yeah, the fact that there were those protesters got into the restaurant in Washington, D.C. the other night is disturbing, though.
Well, we need to remember as well, too, that these protesters are not just average protesters we would have seen 10 years ago. They've become professional. They're funded, that they have been trained, that they know how to operate in ways of sophistication that 5-6 years ago they didn't. So to them, this is not a, fun evening out speaking their free speech message that they hadn't thought of doing the day before. Many times these protesters are trained and funded and know exactly how to take advantage of situations. And so I've told so many people recently, it's not just protesters, but also we're seeing that level of sophistication in the cartels and gangs and cooperation with other governments overseas. And we need to be prepared to meet that technology that they're using and meet that sophistication that they've put in place.
And I know the administration is looking into the funding of some of these protest so-called agitators.
Yes, I know the Department of Justice is looking into that, and we'll continue to cooperate with them on information that we may be helpful on.
Tell us about your childhood growing up and the tragedy that befell you when your father passed away.
Well, from the time I was just a little girl, just wanted to be a farmer and a rancher like my dad. So I was very much a tomboy, and just wanted to be with him outside all the time. So I was the little girl that, collected animals and did chores and drove tractors and then went hunting with my dad all the time too. So that was, one of the reasons that I got through high school, went to college, was just so I could come back home and be a part of our business with him. So when I was in college, he was killed in an accident at the age of 49 on our farm. And that changed everything for our family. That's one of the things that with losing Charlie, there was a lot of it that felt familiar to losing my dad, the weight of it, because there was, when Dad died, everything in our life became, that was the day everything was different. So when we talk about it, that was before Dad died. Well, that happened after Dad died. Like that was the day everything changed and will never be the same. So for me, when Dad died, I didn't know what the future looked like anymore. I quit college and came home. My sister was living in Georgia at the time. My older brother was in Oklahoma, and my younger brother was still in high school. So I quit school and came home and just started working on the farm and ranch every day. I was already married to Brian, and when Dad passed away, I was 8 months pregnant.
Wow.
And so we worked, and eventually my sister moved home and my brother moved home as well. It took them, a year or two to get there. But then after that, I was the general manager of the operation, and we farmed together as a family for 20 years after that. So it was a really special time. But when Dad was killed, we got hit with death taxes. So as I was trying to figure out how to keep our family business together, it was a large farming operation. And we had a ranch. We had a lot of people working for us and depending on us. But at that time, the estate tax rate at the federal level was 55%.
Gosh.
So if you can imagine, we had land and machinery and cattle. We didn't have any money in the bank because most farmers and ranchers don't have cash. They have assets. And so I just could not believe that we had a tragedy in our family and lost our dad. And then all of a sudden we owed the federal government all this money.
Yes.
And it made me mad.
Yeah.
So I just started showing up at meetings and I got passionate about tax reform. And Tom Daschle was the U.S. Senate Majority Leader at the time, and he was from South Dakota. And I just started showing up at his meetings and talking about tax reform and how unfair the death tax was and how if we had just had a gas station or a restaurant, we would have had to sell it to pay those taxes. And for me, I started new businesses, started custom combining. I started a hunting lodge. I started training horses and dogs to make extra money. I started doing all these businesses while raising our kids. And we had some kind, wealthy farmers that I got a bank to finance half of the taxes. These wealthy farmers loaned us the other half, but it took us 10 years to pay it off.
Gosh.
It took us 10 years to pay off those taxes. And so
and that sparked
and
your
it made it hard to keep our business. So that's how I got involved in politics, was just showing up at meetings.
Yeah.
And people kept then just asking me to run.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Why don't you run for office? And eventually we did.
And just back a little bit, you found a tape or some tapes in your dad's pickup truck.
Yeah.
And tell us about that.
Well, my dad, he was like a typical rancher, lived in his pickup. His office was his pickup. So after he was killed, it took me a long time to clean out his pickup. It sat in the yard, and I would say it was several months, I think. And finally, one day I decided I would go out and clean out his pickup and take everything out of it. And in his console by the front seat, as I was cleaning everything out and tools and notebooks and in looking at all of his stuff, there was all these little tapes. And I thought that was strange, in a little tiny tape recorder, a dictation tape recorder. So I put one in and started playing it, and it was his voice. And he was talking into these tapes. And there was him talking about cows, which breed of cows was doing better, and which field, what soil type it had, and how much rainfall it had gotten. And then there was tapes talking about the neighbors, what neighbors were helpful, which ones weren't necessarily, which ones you could trust. And I just remember after Dad passed away, I had so many questions for him. I was running the business. I had hired men. I had to make decisions on seed and fertilizer and chemical. And I had, people helping us, but also giving us advice, and didn't know who to trust. But in these tapes, even I found a tape that was probably 15 years old of him talking about his kids. What he thought our strengths were, what he thought our weaknesses were, what he thought we would grow up to be, what he thought was our downfalls. He thought I was stubborn, a little bit too much like him. But I think what I realized then, sitting in that truck listening to those tapes, it was the answer to every single question I had wanted to ask my dad.
Why do you think he made the tape?
I don't have any idea, because nobody knew he was making them. Nobody knew. It was, and the last tape, he said himself, I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm going to go check cows. And it shut off. And that was the most recent tape. And that's when I knew we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
God loves us so much. He literally just left
these tapes.
Yes, these tapes for us. And it was his voice, which, when somebody passes away, their voice is comforting. And that was, because up until that point, I think I had been living scared.
Yes.
I don't want to lose our family business. I don't want to lose land.
How old were you?
I was 22.
Wow.
Young. Had a brand new baby. And my mom said I wasn't that fun during that time. She said you were angry and not nice, and all you did was work. You would drop that baby off at 5, 6 a.m. and you'd come back and get her at midnight, and you just worked. She said you grieved and wouldn't talk to anybody about it. It was probably a couple of years before it finally caught up with me, but
tough time.
But I think that those tapes just reminded me that, no matter what happens, God will provide. He will provide.
Yeah, amazing that your father made them, didn't know why, but it was so important.
Well, it's not his personality. So he was a doer and a decision maker, and everybody better keep up or you'd be in trouble. So the fact that he did that when he was driving down the road was pretty remarkable.
It's a wonderful story. Yeah. Why the switch to politics? I mean, was it just that you felt that it was interesting, or that you wanted to change things?
Well, the state legislature in South Dakota is only a 40-day session. And I had, after Dad passed away, won an award that was South Dakota's Outstanding Young Farmer.
Right.
So I won that award, and they put me on a couple of boards in the South Dakota Soybean Board. And then I won the next year South Dakota's Outstanding Young Leader. And then, so they kind of put you and you serve and give input. I went to DC and worked on farm bills and policy just as a farmer.
Right.
And then there was an opening for a legislature. It's 40 days a year. You go into session and then you go back home and work your job that pays your bills. And so I ended up running for that. And when I got there, got elected, that the leadership controlled everything. So I thought, well, if I'm going to be here and away from my kids and family for these days, then I'm going to run for leadership. So I got elected as the assistant majority leader and did that. And that was really, I think, when a lot of the pressure came to run for Congress. South Dakota has one congressman.
Right.
And so it's a statewide position. And at that time, we were represented by a Blue Dog Democrat. And we had, a Democrat senator, and they were trying to see if a Republican could represent us in the U.S. House.
So you won?
Yeah, that was a miserable race. I mean, campaigns are not fun if you're, sometimes if you're, don't enjoy conflict. But that was one of the top, I think, 5 races in the nation that year. Because she had a very high approval rating. She was a young woman about my age at that time. And, hadn't voted for Obamacare, she hadn't voted for the stimulus package, which was so controversial. The only vote I could really go after her on was that she voted for Nancy Pelosi. And I talked about that a lot. And so, but it was a very contentious race, and yes, ended up winning. And I remember that night we won, my husband and I were laying in bed and said, now what? Now we have to go to DC, and we hadn't really anticipated that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So amazing to win that. And then what was, you had 8 years, I believe, in DC.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. And, I enjoyed that. Went back and forth. Our family didn't live in DC, but traveled back and forth, which the trip back to South Dakota from DC isn't exactly convenient and short. But there was an opportunity to run for governor of our state. And, being in Congress is wonderful. You get to work on policy and give speeches and do press conferences, but governors are CEOs.
Yeah.
And governors get to make decisions. And I knew that fit my personality better. And I knew that I would love the opportunity to do some things in South Dakota that really helped it grow, that helped our economy get going again, and to really create new industries. Our state needed it for our kids to stay there and get jobs. So I ran for governor and ended up winning that race in 2018.
And what industries did you bring?
Technology and cybersecurity.
Right.
Yeah, we had agriculture is our number one industry, and tourism is our second largest. But we needed some jobs that our kids wanted so they would stay. And we had a university that we established a cybersecurity presence at, and then more than doubled it. And now we train specifically quite a few of our national security folks in our agencies in South Dakota at this university. Quite a few of our NSA employees and folks that go into protecting our infrastructure and grid and get trained in South Dakota. And then technology was something that we needed. We needed to keep our engineers, our computer programs and software and some of the work that we needed to do to build out supporting businesses so they would sustain and thrive in South Dakota.
And then during COVID, I think you came to the fore because you, unlike a lot of other governors, you didn't lock people down and have mandates.
Yeah, we did.
That must have been a difficult decision. How did you come to it?
It was, when COVID started to hit, we had known that it was overseas, that the virus was happening. We had talked about other states that were getting it. And so me and my legal team had talked about the fact that, when it shows up in South Dakota and we get our first cases, Governor, what do you want to do? And so we talked a lot. The questions that I had constantly were, do I have the authority to close businesses in my state? Why do I not have the authority? What happens if I close a business and that business decides to sue me for a taking of their business? I would be liable. Then I would open the state up to, these litigation and liabilities. And that's not my job to make decisions for people. And so I was very clear from the beginning. I did not believe that I had the right to tell people, mandate that they had to stay in their homes, that they had to close their businesses, and took a very firm stand on that. We never changed our way of life in South Dakota. Our kids continued to go to school and people went to work, and I gave them all the information that I had and told them I would, equip them with everything that they would need, but I would let them take personal responsibility and that I would trust them to make the best decisions for them and their family. And South Dakota just thrived under that. People so appreciated that. They saw other states where people were getting arrested for going to the beach, or if they walked out of their front steps of their home, they were getting screamed at by soldiers to go back inside. So it was and then I decided to advertise South Dakota. This was our chance to tell our story. So we did national marketing campaigns telling people, if you want to feel free, come to South Dakota. And they did. And they did. We were covered up in people. And people came to visit with their families and were so changed by the experience, they went home and packed up and moved there.
And why did you have the confidence? You know, you looked around at governors of bigger states like California. What gave you the confidence not to follow what they were doing?
I knew I was right. I just, there's a part of me that when I make a decision, I'm confident in it. And I knew that I was right. And I was getting, if you remember, Miranda, I was getting blown up on the national press every night. I mean, Rachel Maddow went after me on every single show. Elizabeth Warren was just attacking me. Saturday Night Live had skits of me being a vampire and I was killing everybody. And I mean, it was really lonely. It was a lonely time.